Okay, you may be seated. I will report what I know, and I'm going to, actually, Mr. Hand, if you do me a favor, just kind of wait outside for the moment, because there's some things we have to cover before we continue with the testimony. I'm not sure how we're going to proceed, so there's no sense in putting you back to the stand at this point. I will report the following. The jurors were taken downstairs, given some fresh air, brought back to the courtroom. Mr. Christensen, juror 6, has indicated he still does not believe that he can proceed. I have thoughts about how to proceed, but before I go any further, I'm going to solicit from the attorneys on both sides what you're requesting that I do at this time with respect to Mr. Christensen and the situation we're currently in. I will start with the state.
Your Honor, based on the time of 11:34, the state would ask that we take an early before we make any conclusions at this point. Ask that we take an earlier lunch, come back 12:30, 12:45, allow them to have more time to recover from its anxiety attack, because as we had stated, the alternate is the incorrect alternate. These jurors were not asked to stand during their questioning, so we could not get a good view of the different faces of the individuals. Her first name was not announced when she was sat, so that we do have the not accurate alternate who was not in a position to be qualified to sit in that. It also would allow the state...
Well, she's qualified, that's not the issue.
But in regard, she wouldn't have been reached mathematically, she wouldn't have been in that aspect, and the state was not given the opportunity to exercise a preemptory on her as to that. And in addition, if we were to take an early lunch, the state would like additional time to research case law, because this is a very unique circumstance for us to be having sat the wrong...
Never happened to me, I can tell you.
Having sat the wrong juror in a circumstance, and out of a pool of 90, for us to not be able to have seen their faces, for them not to stand, for us not to have alerted the court, hey, we think this is the person, and with the other screen not standing up, there being no distinguish between the first names.
All right, well, right now, all you've done is requested an early lunch.
Correct.
Okay, so I've got that. You've asked for an early lunch. Defense, what is the defense asking of you?
Obviously, I don't want someone who's ill to sit on the jury, because that will not do them good, and I think it will not do anyone good. So, assuming that that person leaves, my first motion would be, or my first inclination would be, that the alternate, who is legally sworn, through no error on the defense part, that the alternate take the sick juror's place and we proceed.
Okay, let me do this. We're going to break this down. What about the request for an early lunch? Do you have any problem with that? Okay. I think that's probably a good suggestion. However, I will alert you, I do not believe, based on what's been reported to me, that it's going to make a difference with respect to Mr. Christensen. But I do think it's appropriate, given the magnitude of the situation, to give him an additional opportunity to take an early lunch, then come back and tell us how he's feeling. What I want to deal with, though, right now, before we break, is the procedure that is going to be followed when we get back from lunch. And here's what I mean by that. All of what's been reported so far about Mr. Christensen is not on the record, other than him raising his hand and indicating that he needed to take a break because he was not feeling well. What has been reported, other than that, is obviously through Neil, who's met with the jurors and reported back to me. It seems to me, I'm going to outline the procedure I think is appropriate to be followed here. We're going to take an early lunch. When we get back, if Mr. Christensen reports to Neil that he's fine, we'll just proceed. If he reports that despite the early lunch, he does not feel like he can proceed, I think we probably need to bring him out individually. And let me ask him about that and make sure that he confirms on the record that he does not feel like he can proceed, that because of whatever, his anxiety, that he cannot continue to listen to the testimony in the case. I think that needs to be on the record. Then at that point, I need to make a decision as to how we're going to proceed. The defendant's request, as I understand it, unless it changes between now and when we come back, is that we proceed with the alternate, we seek the alternate, we proceed forward, and since, Ms. Scott, you're planning to do some research, I'm putting this on the record for you right now so you understand what the issues are and what the consequences are. But I don't want to misstate the defense's position either, so that's why I'm putting this on the record. My understanding is that the defense is requesting that if Mr. Christensen cannot proceed, that the alternate, Ms. Green, be seated and that we proceed with the trial. And therefore, my understanding would be that the defense is not agreeing to release both Ms. Green and Mr. Christensen, causing a situation which would result in a mistrial. So my understanding is, and I won't put words in your mouth, my understanding is that you would not be, as the defense, agreeing at this point to allow the state to exercise its peremptory on the screen and then also release Mr. Christensen, causing a situation where we're missing a necessary juror. So, am I correct?
Yes, except I believe, and Your Honor has shown yourself more knowledgeable in the law than me several times.
I don't know about that. But
I believe that I could then discuss with my client proceeding with my juror.
you could, but I can't suggest that. Well, here's why I'm trying to set it up this way, because Ms. Godden's asked for some time to research this issue. So let me frame the issue for you, Ms. Godden, if this is something you're going to request that I do over defense's objection. Obviously, I'm putting that off the table right now. I'm about 5. That's something I can't suggest. You have to come up with that on your own. Understand the issue this way, Ms. Godden. This juror, although is the wrong Ms. Green came forward. She's otherwise qualified to serve as a juror. She was sworn without objection. I understand why. You don't have to tell me why. I understand, it's difficult when you've got 60 jurors to know who's standing up, who's taking the seat. So I understand there was nevertheless a mistake, but this juror was duly sworn. If I, by necessity, must excuse Mr. Christensen, and the remedy that the state is asking for is that I strike a duly qualified, although not the right Ms. Green, a duly qualified juror. And if there's no later agreement with respect to proceeding with 5, creating a mistrial situation over defense objection, I think creates double jeopardy. I don't think the case gets retried. That's the research you need to do. It's a unique situation. I've not faced a situation before, fortunately, and I hope I never do again. But that's my concern. The state's not objecting, the defense is not objecting to proceeding with this Ms. Green. And therefore, if I create a situation, as requested perhaps by the state, that could lead to a mistrial in the case over defense objection, that's double jeopardy.
That's why I'm asking.
Yeah, I understand. I doubt you're going to find any law on this, but that's my analysis. I've got a duly qualified, if incorrect Ms. Green, a duly qualified, otherwise qualified. There was no for-cause reason to challenge her. I understand state would have exercised a peremptory if they had gotten that opportunity, or if she was one of the persons that would have been selected. So I understand that. I also, so you understand, if you're asking to proceed with Ms. Green, if that becomes the situation, I'm going to colloquy your client on that to make sure that she is okay with proceeding with Ms. Green given the circumstances.
I have no problem with colloquying my client, whatever the decision.
Okay, well, I just want to make sure that she's in line with that. I'm not suggesting, understand, I have not, again, the court cannot suggest proceeding with 5. I wasn't even anticipating that. I was anticipating a situation where if we lose Mr. Christensen and we also, if the state comes back and makes a request that I strike Ms. Green, what that causes and what that creates. Because my understanding is that's not what the defense is asking for. The defense is asking that we finish the trial with Ms. Green if we release Mr. Christensen. Correct. Okay. All right, let me do this. I'm going to call them in. Let's see, what time do I bring them back? It's 4 till 12. I bring them back at 1 o'clock. So what we're going to do is we're going to take a short break, well, a short break, an hour and 15 minutes for lunch. I'll tell them at that time. brought the jury back into the jury room from lunch, what was reported by Mr. Christensen was he feels about the same. Now, Neil didn't do any further inquiry, obviously. It just indicates that there still appears to be an issue. And so what I think is appropriate this time is to bring Mr. Christensen in, let me speak with him. It's not my intent to have you guys examine Mr. Christensen. I'm going to ask questions. If there's something you think I needed to ask, not ask, just say, Judge, can we approach? You come up and tell me what you think needs to be asked. But this is not a cross-examination of the juror. So if you bring out Mr. Christensen, please. Ms. Christian, you can just have a seat, your assigned seat, or wherever you want to sit is fine. Counsel, please be seated. I brought you out because you were not feeling well and have expressed some concern about your ability to continue. So I just want to talk to you about that to make sure that we now understand what the situation is. And let me, before you begin, tell you, please do not feel guilty, embarrassed, or anything else about needing to disclose to us a problem if there is a problem about proceeding. And the other thing I want to remind you of, and this is something I said during jury selection, but it's most important that I remind you now. If I, again, parrot back to you what I think you're telling me or what I'm hearing, and I get it wrong, and you let me tell me, don't make put words in your mouth, is what I'm saying, Mr. Christian. You indicated, at least to Deputy Cascone, that you had some concern about your ability to continue as a juror, some anxiety. Is that correct? Do I have that right?
Yes.
Okay. And I want to just talk a little bit about that. You've had a little bit of an opportunity. We took a break, first to go out and get some air, then we took a lunch break. Just tell me, how are you feeling now?
Right now I feel weak and somewhat nauseous.
All right. And let me again just ask, is this something, because I have to plan and decide how I'm going to proceed, is this something that you feel if we took a longer break you might be able to recover from and be in a position to proceed? Or is this a situation where you believe, based on how you're feeling, that you're not going to be able to continue as a juror in the case? And only you know how you're feeling, and we want to work with you as much as we can. So how do you feel about whether or not you're going to be able to overcome this, might be able to come back a little later, or whether you think that this is a situation where you just yourself do not feel like you can continue as a juror in this case?
I've been thinking about it and I just feel like it would reoccur.
All right, and so again, I do not want to put words in your mouth, but what I'm hearing you tell me is that even if I give you a further break, even if we recess for this afternoon and decided to come back tomorrow morning to continue with the trial at that time, are you saying you believe that really wouldn't be sufficient? It's really not going to change the way you're feeling?
That's correct.
All right, and so am I also correct that, and again, I keep stressing it because I don't want to suggest things to you, and I don't want to put words in your mouth. But what I'm hearing you tell me is based on your anxiety level with respect to the trial, the testimony, that you don't feel like you can continue to serve as a juror. Is that what you're telling us?
Yes.
Okay. All right. Anything additional parties wish to approach on?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
All right, Ms. Christian, if you would just, we're going to bring you back out in a moment, but if you just step into the jury room for just a moment, please do not discuss anything with the other prospective jurors. Okay, based on what I'm hearing, it sounds like Mr. Christensen does not believe, based on how he's feeling, his anxiety level, that he can continue as a juror in the case, which means from my perspective, and I'm going to hear it from the parties, but from my perspective, he would need to be removed. Does anyone disagree with that assessment, that he is not able to continue?
No, sir. No, sir.
All right. Understanding that he can no longer continue, let me now ask the question I asked or started to ask before lunch. What do the parties want me to do at this time? We have an alternate. It's been established that Ms. Green was not the Ms. Green that we thought we were calling for as an alternate. So she was not the alternate selected by the parties. But absent the state's exercise of peremptory, obviously, she's otherwise duly qualified to serve. Ms. Godwin, what does the state want to do? Or is it Mr. Scott?
Yes. I would ask that at this time, the court would require defense. First, is the defense objecting to proceeding forward with 5 jurors?
Why would I ask that question at this time?
I just want to make a record that the defense is electing to go forward with the alternate, because I do believe that...
I'll make that record if that's what they're asking for, but here's my concern about what you just said. As you know, the law is crystal clear. A court cannot suggest or imply to parties that they should proceed with less than 6. The parties can do it on their own, and they can stipulate, but if a court does that and suggests either directly or indirectly that the parties go with 5, that's reversible error.
I'm not suggesting that. The state's position, and my understanding, having spoken to the Attorney General's office, that there would be no manifest injustice at this time. The state is not asking for a mistrial. I just want the defense, if they're not objecting, if they're making any wishes, to be crystal clear on the record so we avoid any further issues.
Yeah, candidly, I think this is totally in the defense's hands.
Yes.
That's my perspective on this issue. So, how would the defense like to proceed?
Well, first I'd like to make a brief record, which is that we were all informed that this was the wrong Ms. Green. I was totally satisfied with either Ms. Green on behalf of the defense. The state did not seek to bring in the correct one. The state did not seek to bring in a new veneer panel to pick another one. The state waived that right. As such, what we are asking the court to do is, as you would in any other trial, take Ms. Green, who's the alternate, and make her the 6th jury, and let's finish this trial.
I'm a little bit concerned with your predicate to that. I mean, the state asked, the remedy the state asked for was that she, as I recall, that she be removed immediately, is what the request was.
Yes.
I think you had made a request that perhaps if that happened, we call back, suggested perhaps we call back the correct Ms. Green. So I'm not sure about the predicate that the state waived anything, although I think perhaps if there was any waiver, the waiver would occur when the juror was sworn and no one objected. But that aside, in terms of once the error was discovered, I'm not sure the state has waived anything. So I want to be clear going forward, because I'm not going to take the request from the defense under the understanding or implication that the state waived anything. What I have to do is find out whether the defense is willing, freely and voluntarily, to proceed with Ms. Green at this time. And if the defense is, as I indicated, I believe I probably should also call with your client to make sure that that's what she wants to do.
The defense absolutely wishes to go forward, continue the trial, Ms. Green replacing the ill juror.
Okay, so let me, I would like to go ahead and take a colloquy from your client. She can sit right there, it's fine, as long as I can make eye contact. Please raise your right hand for me. Do you swear or affirm the evidence you're about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? Okay, you may put your hand down. Would you just, for the record, go ahead and state your full name?
Melanie Eam.
Okay, Ms. Eam, what I want to do right now is that you've been listening to the conversation that's been going on, but I have to make sure that you understand what we're doing and that you consent to what's happening at this time. As was discovered yesterday, in this trial, we did select an alternate. Both alternates have the surname, the last name of Green. When I call, I think the actual Green, let's see if this is the record correct. The alternate that was selected was juror 4-6, Katrina Green. When I called for the jury to come forward, Caroline Green, who was juror 6-5, actually came forward, took a seat, and was sworn as an alternate juror. As you know, we discovered that error yesterday. Normally, the parties would be entitled to proceed with the jury they selected, okay, including the alternate they selected. Obviously, this was not the Miss Green that everyone thought was being selected. Nevertheless, we're now in a situation where we have one juror, Mr. Christensen, who cannot proceed. And so seating the alternate is now an issue that must be addressed. I want to make sure, number one, and I don't want you to tell me what you spoke to your attorney about, because that's a privilege. In terms of this issue about whether to accept the other Miss Green, that is Carolyn Green, as opposed to Katrina Green, have you had a chance to speak to your attorney about whether to do that, to proceed with this alternate?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And for yourself, are you okay proceeding with the Miss Green that we have seated as the alternate? Is that okay with you?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so you're willing to go forward with the alternate that we now have, Ms. Green, is that right? Okay. Anything else the state is requesting at this time?
Just not requesting anything further, John, just to make a record, if you're on, allow me briefly to make a record before we proceed.
But that's fine. Go ahead.
Just first, that this is not the alternate state and panel. As Your Honor rightly stated, it was juror number 46, Katrina Green, that the jurors did not stand when going to their individual voir dire, so it was difficult to see them, that they did not sit in their assigned seats when they came back into the courtroom, so that there was no way to tell from which row Mrs. Green came from. Both of the Miss Greens were both black females that were approximately the same age, so there was nothing about the age or race or gender of the person that would have differentiated. There was, when the court called out to the alternate jurors being paneled, the court merely said Miss Green without stating any first name or any juror number. No one in the courtroom, including the court, the defense, the defendant, the state, court deputy, or Ms. Katrina Green, who could have indicated by asking a question, which Green do you mean, realized that the wrong Green had been impaneled. And finally, I do believe that counsel was incorrect when he made his predicate record previously, that what he stated was when the state requested, when we realized that a mistake had been made, the defense did ask that we bring the proper juror back. So given that record and given the state is not asking for a mistrial, we're ready to proceed this time.
All right. I think we can all agree we missed it. So I don't disagree with what you put on the record, but I think we can all agree that we missed the seating of the proper alternate, court included.
May I remove this microphone?
Yes, please do. All right, what we're going to do is we're going to bring Mr. Christensen out first. We're going to discharge him. We'll move on with the trial with the alternate seated Ms. Green. And I'll let you call your witness back in just a moment. Okay. Counsel may be seated. Welcome back. Based on what you've told us, we're going to go ahead and discharge you from jury service in this case. So I don't know whether we have a certificate of appreciation. You do have a certificate of appreciation for you. We're going to give that to you. The deputy is going to escort you out one last time through the judicial hallway as before. Again, I appreciate your service. I understand this happens at times. You should not in any way feel bad, guilty, or in any way embarrassed by this. It does occur, and so we do appreciate your service so far. We're going to discharge you at this time.
I apologize to everyone.
If you want to go ahead and bring the witness back in, we can see the witness. So you can go ahead and come forward and take a seat on the back of the witness box.
Jury's in, right?
All right, counsel, may be seated. Welcome back. Ms. Jury, I do apologize for the delay. We're now ready to continue with direct examination. Ms. Scott, whenever you're ready.
Mr. Hand, I believe we left off, you said you observed on your night, the night that you described, on the ground near the bed. What was the condition, what did you notice about that?
It wasn't where it belonged.
Did you notice, I believe this is where we ended, was there blood on the knife?
Covered.
And did that include both the handle as well as the blade?
Yes.
At this point, when you're in the room, is there a point where you, Jeff, and Nicola are all in James's bedroom?
I believe so. It's hard to remember, but I believe we were all in there.
And are you, at this time when you're in the bedroom and you see the knife, are you still only in those shorts that you described putting over the
Yes.
options? Do you have any shoes on?
No,
Do you know, did Nicola have any shoes on?
Nipple was barefoot.
What did you do when you saw the knife?
They were telling us to come out, and I think that's when maybe we were all in the room or something, and I picked up the knife with these 3 fingers and walked it down the hall and laid it on the counter by the trash can, just so no one would kick it and cut their toes.
And at that time, you and Nicola, do you remember if Jeff also had shoes on? Or
I don't recall.
When you moved the knife, you said you put it on the counter. Was that the counter in the kitchen?
Yes.
I'm showing you it's already been in it at state 68. Is that the knife that you saw on the ground? And I can approach. Sometimes with the glare, you're not able to see. Is the glare, is this the knife that you've been describing to us?
Yes.
And is that the kitchen counter?
Yes.
Okay. And at that point, did you just leave the knife on the kitchen counter?
Yes.
At the time this was happening, has it been chaotic and traumatic, what you just saw, what happened to James?
Actually,
Sustained regret.
When all of this was happening, what were you thinking? What are your thoughts as what you just observed?
It was about like you said then. I was just astonished. I couldn't believe this was happening. Blood all over the walls. And watching James die on my hands. I was...
Were you thinking when you picked up the knife and moved it, were you thinking about anything besides not cutting your feet?
No.
And this, you said that when everyone arrived that you walked out, side and last to be outside. At some point, you said it was the cold front. Did one of your neighbors, Miss Cynthia Steinhouse, did she come over to the home and see both of you, both you and
We had to
Nicola?
go out to the street. And it's a gravel road. I was cold. She come out and gave me a light colored flannel shirt, sweatshirt looking thing, and nickel up the road, and a pair of slippers. I was still getting it.
And at the point in time, did you stay in that roadway outside yours and Nicola's home while the police continued to arrive?
Yes, so the police were there. EMTs got there and stuff, and ambulance or whatever, and they backed up into the driveway, and we had to stay out in the street.
And when detectives and other law enforcement, crime scene investigators, when they arrived, did you continue to remain outside the home?
Yes,
Did you yourself agree to speak to the police and tell them what you knew?
yes, I spoke to Detective Oliver.
And in addition to speaking to Detective Oliver, did you also agree to have yourself photographed.
Yes.
And I'm showing you a picture of Exhibit 78 photograph, and I know you don't see
That's
this.
the shirt that Sylvia, or me, Cynthia gave me.
And it's that you that we see, your face is cut off, but is that you that's in the sweatshirt that we see?
Yeah, I think so.
And is this what you were, those shorts that you were wearing, State 79, is that you?
Yes, they wanted to take a picture of my hands, but I
And then,
washed one hand with
and did they also have you lift up your shirt and show your stomach? Do you remember?
You know, I don't remember that part. They may have.
Okay, I approach.
Yes.
I'm approaching with what has already been admitted as 97, A through F. Are these additional, besides the two photographs, are these additional photographs that were taken of you and your hands at the time?
Yes.
And is that in addition to your hands, do we also see the back of your body? Did they have you lift up your shirt?
I guess so, yes.
And did they also have you lift up your stomach?
Well, my stomach's kind of big.
I'm sorry, lift up your shirt to expose your stomach.
Yes.
And that's what we've seen in all of the State Exhibit 97. Is that what?
Yes, yes, that's all me.
Now, in addition to speaking to the police and letting them photograph you, did you also ask you to submit to a DNA swab?
Yes, they did. No objection.
And at this time, based on your judgment from the defense counsel, the state would enter DNA swab of Mr. Hand, state 127.
All right, 127 of evidence without objection.
At some point in time, did police also ask you if a phone that had been recovered was yours? Did they show you a phone to see that it was yours?
No, they never showed me the phone.
Did they describe to you a phone that they had recovered to see if it was yours, or ask you where yours was?
They said they found a phone, and I told them my phone is my alarm clock that's by the bed.
And did you tell them at that time that you knew where your phone was and that it was in your bedroom?
Yes.
Here, I'm going to go to it.
Yes.
I'm approaching you with photographs 89 and 90. The pink phone that we see in these photographs, was that your phone?
No.
And the same that we see in 95, was that your phone?
Nope.
And you spoke of Miss Eam knowing what type of vehicle she drove, and we talked about that earlier. I'm showing you here her
Yes.
states 199, 100, and 103. The white vehicle that you described as Eam drove, is that the same vehicle that we see in photographs 99, 103, and 100?
Yes, that looks like the car that pulled up to the driveway, too.
So it's the same vehicle that you knew Ms. Eam to drive as well as the one you saw around 8:30 that night?
Correct.
In regards to Mr. James Berry, did you have any reason to harm Mr. James Berry?
No, I love you.
Did you, on the morning of November 17, 2016, did you stab and kill James Berry?
No, I did not.
I do not have any further questions.
All right, cross-examination.
How many certificates do you have?
4.
Certified. You're a certified butcher, correct?
Yes.
What else are you
I'm
certified?
certified. Once.
I'm sorry?
One.
Are you certified in CPR?
Yes, I was.
Okay.
We had to get certified every year.
Okay. How many classes would you say you took in CPR?
Somewhere between 10 and 15.
How many of those classes did they instruct you that the first thing to do was to lay the victim or the person on a flat, hard surface?
About every time.
What flat, hard surface did you move Jane's body onto?
The bed.
Is that a flat, hard surface, Mr. Hammond?
No, it's not.
So the very first thing you did was disobey a rule you have been told some 10 times?
That's what the dispatch told us to do also.
When you moved the body, was the dispatcher already on the phone?
I don't recall.
So the dispatcher really didn't tell you move the body onto the bed, did they? They didn't even know there was a
One
bed.
time she did.
And what training did you have to become a certified butcher?
They give you a test where you're cutting meat at a store.
Why did you take a Valium that night?
Because I'd taken a nap during the day, and I knew I probably wouldn't go to sleep, so I took a half Valium.
Was that prescribed to you?
Yes.
And was Ms. Berry wearing earplugs that night?
Maybe, I don't recall.
What brand was the knife?
A Dexter.
What other details can you tell me about the knife?
It's long.
How long?
White handle. About like this. I think it has somewhere around a 12 or 13-inch blade on it.
Is
I
this,
never really measured it.
is this a knife that you have from when you were a butcher?
Yes.
Before going to bed, do you have the habit of locking all the doors of the home?
Yes, I do.
Why did you pick up the murder weapon?
Nipple and I were barefoot, for one, and I just looked at the knife and I was kind of traumatized, and I picked it up off the floor so it wouldn't get kicked around.
Okay, there's a computer stand in that bedroom.
Over in the corner.
There's
Window.
a black dresser in that room.
A TV, I think, over here by the other wall.
And the brown dresser in that room.
Towards the foot of the bed by the wall, that was just closed.
Wouldn't it have saved the feet and toes of everyone involved if you had merely picked up the knife and placed it on any of those 3 tables?
Over. Probably.
Instead, you carried it through the house to the kitchen,
Yeah.
and that was upon an order by the police to exit the room.
Yeah. At
So-
some point.
You left the murder scene at the request of the police carrying a butcher knife. That your
I wasn't carrying it like that, no.
Were you carrying it?
Yes.
So you effectively removed any fingerprints or DNA by taking it to the kitchen, right?
Objection, second.
Sustained.
Did you destroy any other evidence prior to speaking to the police?
No.
Did you wash?
Myself,
Yes.
one hand outside.
Which hand?
Uh,
You were just holding up your right hand.
I believe it was my left hand I washed outside. I recall, it's in the picture.
There are no pictures of you washing your hands, sir. Which hand did you wash?
I believe my left. I'm not sure. I washed it with a little bit of water.
You seem to be squeezing with your other hand. Is that signifying soap?
No, that's signifying.
So you were outside, about to be questioned by the police. You had already moved the murder weapon, and you now decided to wash your hand. Correct?
Objection compound.
I think I'd already been interviewed by Detective Oliver.
So when you told Detective Oliver, when he wanted a photograph, well, I washed my hand, you were mistaken, you hadn't?
No, I think I had washed my hand. I don't know, I'm confused.
If I could have one moment, please.
Give me, explain yourself.
Judge, if I could have one moment.
All right, just 1 second, he'll rephrase this question.
I show you the bottom of page 20, line 24, and the top of page 21, if I may. Thank you. And the top of page 21, lines 1 through 7.
Lines what now?
May I show the witness?
Yes.
Yes,
And just for the record, this is the November 17, 2016.
Yeah, that was the hand that I washed. I rubbed my face.
Does that help you with your recollection whether you washed before speaking to the police?
No.
No, it doesn't.
But if I talk to Oliver, I'm confused about what you want. What is your question now?
Did you wash your hand before you were questioned by the police?
Yes, did you just say that?
Yes, it did. That's what I'm asking you.
Yes.
So you moved the murder weapon from the room. You washed evidence off of your hand. What were you trying to hide?
Nothing.
When asked why you moved the murder weapon, you didn't tell the police you were worried about people cutting their feet, did you?
I don't recall what I told him.
So when you entered the room, Jeff was giving mouth-to-mouth to the doctor, James, correct?
Yes.
So his face was basically buried in his face, correct?
Yeah, I guess.
So as you entered the room, you could not see Jeff's face, did you?
I don't think so.
And if you couldn't see Jeff's face, Jeff, of course, couldn't see yours, correct?
Objection, speculation.
Over.
Evidently.
So when you came into the room, James was on the floor, and you instructed Jeff to lift him from the hard floor and put him on the bed, correct?
No.
Isn't that what your testimony was this morning?
He was sitting on the floor, slumped against the bed.
And it was your
Him
idea,
on a flat surface.
the bed.
Yes.
You don't like the feeling of having something on your throat, right?
Why?
When you sleep?
No.
Pretty bloody scene while you tried to safe chain,
Yes.
and you have blood all over you?
And on my chest, my belly, my hands, my arms.
Covered in blood, correct?
Yeah, more or less.
May I please have the... May I approach?
Yes.
Thank you. I show you what's been marked as, has been moved into evidence, it states 79. You don't look covered in blood there, do you?
No, my one hand is clean and the other one isn't.
I show you what's in evidence as states 97A. There's no blood showing there, is it?
On my bottom of my belly there is. Shirt might have washed some off, I don't know. I definitely don't have a tan.
Just how much washing did you do before you presented yourself to the police?
One hand, because I wiped my face.
You didn't have any blood on your face either, did you?
No, but I was getting bit by mosquitoes.
I'm sorry. Other than moving the knife closer to the sink and using water to wash whoever's blood was on you off of you, did you eliminate any other evidence in this case?
No.
Thank you.
Redirect.
Defense counsel asked you a question about you leaving the murder scene. Did you stay at the address 16112 Glasgow Drive? Did you stay there for hours into the night?
Till daylight.
In either the yard or the road?
Correct.
And did you ever leave until the police were finished with their investigation? And in regards to going outside, was that based on the direction of law enforcement?
Yes.
Did you see Miss Eam there present when law enforcement was conducting the investigation? Was she there?
No.
When James is in his room, and you said he slouched against the bed, is he slouched against the bed and where the dresser meets? Like
No,
that
he
area?
slouched against, he was sitting on the floor, slouched against the corner of his bed.
And when he slouched against the corner of his bed, do you, at that point, based on the CPR training that you've received at work, do you think that you'll be able to do CPR compressions with him in that position?
No, no way.
Do you move James to the bed because you think it's the best idea at that time?
Objection, lead it.
The second just rephrase the question.
Why did you move James to the bed?
To get him flat.
And as you see James is gushing blood to you at that point, do you think that will help?
It would help with compressions, it would help with trying to stop him bleeding, instead of just slumped over. And I'm listening to dispatch. Put him on a flat surface, not necessarily a hard flat surface, a flat surface.
And when you come, you said that you and Nipple are sleeping and you're woken up by the screaming. When you come, and defense counsel asked you about when you saw Jeff, when Jeff was doing compressions. But when you first come out of your room, across the hallway from James's room, are you, when you're coming out of that door, able to see James and Jeff in the room?
I don't really recall if the door was open, but I think it was.
And
opened my door and looked right to the right, I think I seen Jeff and James at that point.
And at that point, is that when you saw that James was injured and that you saw blood on James?
Yes.
And so at that point, because you can see James and all this blood, was at that point when you're coming out of the room, was Jeff already providing aid, or did that happen when you went into James's bedroom?
Boy, that's hard to remember. I think he was messing with James or something, and screaming, call 911.
But in that hallway, before you get into James's room, can you see Jeff and James?
Yes.
And defense counsel asked you about the water. Did you purposely go into a bathroom, rinse off your whole body of all the blood?
No.
When you speak of the water that you put on your face, did you have to wash your hand in order to put water on your face?
Objection, lead it.
I got water outside from a police officer in the street to wash my hand.
And in that, and then once, when you're talking about the mosquitoes, is that why you were applying the water to your face?
Yes, this hand was bloody, this hand was bloody, the mosquitoes were biting me, and I went like that, and I went, oh God. So I washed this hand and wiped my face off some more so the mosquitoes wouldn't just eat me alive.
And what we see in state 79, and I'll adjust the light. So when we talk about the hand, in this hand where we can see your right hand, is that the one that still has the blood on it?
Yes,
And then the left hand on the, just the base of the palm of your hand, is that where the
Right.
burn stops?
yes.
And in regards to that same left hand, and I'll approach it if you can't see, that same left hand that you had rinsed the palm of, did it still have blood on the top of your hand?
Yeah,
And the same as to the, even the base when they close up, did you still have blood on your hand?
yeah, a little bit.
And the lighting was a little bit off, but this area around your stomach, is that where the blood was?
Yes.
And when you're doing compression on James when he's on the bed, when you're doing compressions and putting your hand on it, is that bottom belly that you saw in the picture, is that the part that's touching James and the surrounding blood?
Yes.
As well as your arms right here? I mean,
Well,
your
I had
hands
one
right here.
hand covering the wound and the other hand kind of back here doing the compressions.
So the blood that you saw in your hand, that's coming from your direct contact with
That's
James?
coming up between my fingers and on top of my hand. Every time I do a compression, the blood would squirt up.
When you moved the knife from James' bedroom onto the kitchen counter, still within the home, were you doing that to hide or tamper with any evidence?
Objection, lead it.
Repeat that again?
When you moved the knife from the bedroom to the kitchen in the same home, did you do that to tamper with or hide any evidence?
No.
Were you thinking when you did that? Were you
Probably not. I was traumatized. I just watched him die in my arms.
I do not have any further questions.
I understand you may step down, thank you. Stay ready to call 611.
Yes. At this time, the state will call Nipple a bear.
Outside.
Okay, you